Welcome to another edition of the ADOS podcast. Let's get started. So I have Linda Miller joining me right now. I'm going to allow you the opportunity to introduce yourself because you're going to probably do a better job at it than I
Okay.
will. So Linda, please tell the audience who you are.
Well, my name is Linda Miller, and I grew up on the north side of Minneapolis, and I'm here today because I am now a children's book author. And so thank you for inviting me here, Elijah, today. I grew up again on North Minneapolis. I went to North High School. I started working with kids when I was about 14, actually, as a tutor with kids on the north side. I used to love to read. I think I lived at Sumner Library because it was a couple blocks from my house. So I used to just go there all the time, and I used to help out whenever I could. So I've always kind of been a giver. But I did childcare for about 33 years. And during that time of doing childcare, I started to write stories and write songs and stuff for my childcare. I had a pretty diverse childcare in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I just couldn't find things for the kids. And so I just started writing stories. And I think that that's how I developed a love for writing, children's stories. But from there, I ended up doing some training in diversity and inclusion. It kind of, emerged into a new position and started helping childcare programs and childcare centers be more inclusive in their childcare programs. So it evolved from there and really got a focus on, helping people put diversity and being inclusive in their storytelling and in the things that they were introducing to children. But that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. That's amazing. And you mentioned that one of your goals is to diversify that industry, right? Of authors,
Yeah.
especially coming from places like Northside Minneapolis, being a woman, being African American woman at that. Have you seen other people in that community who look like you, who are in the same space?
Meaning in the community when I was doing childcare or
Writing, book writing, author.
yeah, you're starting to see more. I'm involved in a lot of Facebook groups on Facebook, and there's a couple of Black authors and illustrator groups that I'm part of. So I think the more I dig, the more I find, they're not just out there like regular books and book groups and things like that. You have to look for them and become part of them. But I think there's a large group of African Americans that are really pulling together collaboratively to make a mark on the industry of children's literacy and children's books.
It's interesting. When we were talking last week, we were talking about how underrepresented our population is in that industry. I actually went off and did some research, as I told you I would, and I found
Right,
that there's about 180,000 people who are classified as writers and authors in America. And out of that 180,000 people, roughly about 6,000 of them consider themselves to be Black. And it is a female dominated industry, right? Meaning that there's more female writers and authors than there are males. But overwhelmingly, the majority of them are all white. And there's I think the next group of people are Asian Americans, and
right,
and then Black Americans are just 6,000 out of that 180,000. I mean, to me, that
right.
was just kind of mind blowing. I mean, I knew it was low, but that's really, really low. And this is
Yeah,
across the
there's a
country.
right. There's a huge disparity in Black authors and BIPOC authors. It's not easy to break into the market, and it's not easy to get people to hear you and really recognize you for your style of writing and who you are as a author of color. Yeah, it's roughly about 85% of books that are reviewed across the nation are from white authors. They're really not from authors of color. So, the hope is that one day that we can, reduce that gap and increase because there's a lot of us out there, you know, and some of us may or may not have given up on our dream of writing, and because it's so hard, it's a lot of work and it's really hard. So, the hope is that, we can, reduce that gap.
Were you ever at that point in your career where you're just like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm about to go do something else. I'm done writing these books. I'm not getting anywhere. Did you ever experience that at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. So my first children's book, Isaiah's Sunglasses, I actually wrote that when I did childcare over 25 years ago. Well, longer than that actually. And in 20, um, maybe around the year 2000, I tried to submit it to be published. And of course, you get your rejection letters over and over and over. And so at that point, I just said, well, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe this isn't the time. And so I actually put it aside. I didn't do anything. I just kind of gave up on it. And I didn't stop writing, but I gave up on trying to break through the market at that time. And then a few years ago, I ran into a friend of mine who was starting, she's an educator and she was starting a publishing company, an African American woman, Mary Terrace, who started Stride Publishing. And we were friends. So we were just chatting and I gave her Isaiah's Sunglasses. I said, well, here, take a look at this. And then she loved it. And so she wanted to publish it. So I ended up being one of her founding authors. And so that was the first book that I had traditionally published through a publisher. And since that has my contract ended with Strive, and then at that point, I had to decide what I was going to do, if I was going to continue writing, if I was going to continue pursuing this. I'm not young. I am 65 years old, and so it's like, do you start this in retirement? It's like, sure, why not? And so I decided to self-publish and go that route. I learned a lot going the traditional route, and then I said, okay, let me try this. I'm not going to give up on it yet. And so I self-published my first book, Miley's Magical Curls, earlier this year in March. And so it was a lot of work, and I'm not going to quit at this point because I love it so much.
Well, I got a few things to say about that, but the first thing is, wow, 65 years old, you don't look a day over 40.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I I have 8 grandchildren.
Eight grand.
I do, and I
And they
draw
don't
from them
drive
a
you up
lot
the
too.
wall? They don't drive you up the
Oh
wall?
no, no, absolutely not. No. I mean, yeah, they do sometimes, but I love them so much. I love talking to my grandkids because I draw a lot from children when I talk with children, my ideas and for book ideas, and they have no filter. I love having conversations with them because they're just going to tell you straight. And
Mhm.
some of the things that they say, they just give me so much material. That's all I can say.
You know
So.
what? That was gonna be my next question is where do you currently drive or what do you currently look for or, in people or just in the community or whatever to draw inspiration from in your creativity? Like what currently drives your work now? I know before you said it was you're working in childcare, you always
Mhm.
had a passion for teaching and working with kids.
Right.
What currently drives that inspiration and creativity to this day?
So I draw from a lot of different places. And so I'll take Isaiah Sunglasses first, my first book. It's a rhyming book. And part of my childcare program was early literacy because I really, really wanted children to learn to read before they entered kindergarten. So everything that I created or wrote or sang or whatever I did with the kids in the kids program had to do with early literacy. But then Isaiah's Sunglasses came along. I got this idea because I worked with special needs kids and I had deaf parents in my program. And so I got this idea to write this rhyming book about a kid who was blind. And the thing about it is that I didn't want people to know he was blind until later in the book. And so Isaiah, I just wanted people to see Isaiah for who he was, a little kid, rambunctious, did everything, probably drove his parents crazy and everything, but I didn't want the reader and the listener to know that he was blind until later on. I wanted the listener to really see and listen who he was before they saw his disability. And so I wrote Isaiah's Sunglasses, and that was my first published book. The second book, Miley's Magical Curls, is a story that we're just starting to hear about now. It's about an African American father who's divorced from his ex is a white woman, he's African American, and then he has a biracial daughter. And so in the divorce, the Miley was 5 when they got divorced, and so he had to learn how to do her hair. And she has tons and tons and tons of curls. And so the story is about his determination to make his daughter feel proud his determination to make her feel valued, his determination to learn to do something to help her feel beautiful. And in the process, they developed a really strong bond with one another. So, and then of course, it's about the hair. So in the back of the book, there's tips for, how to deal with curls because, in the BIPOC community, we know our hair is a little different, you handle it a little differently. But then my latest book, The Two Flowers, I think that this was my greatest challenge because I wrote this. I was invited to a lower school academy rally to speak during Black History Month earlier this year. And so, what I do when I go to speak with children and youth is I tell a story. And although I read Isaiah Sunglasses, I also wrote this story called The Two Flowers because I really wanted the young people to understand more about discrimination, social inequality, and bias. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to explain that to kids, especially now with everything that's happening. It's a little bit more challenging. Well, why are you protesting? What is this all about, really? So, and trying to help them understand the root of systemic racism and social inequality. So I wrote this story called The Two Flowers. I didn't want to use people, and I'm a gardener, so it was like a perfect fit for me. So I wrote this story about two flowers, and how one is treated differently than the other. One is treated basically better than the other, and then the result of what can happen to that. And I did that in a way to help them see, because who doesn't like flowers? But because people see the beauty in flowers, they don't always see the beauty in other people. So there's a lot of messages with this story, and it was a harder one because I had to try to explain it to people and educators and teachers and parents who are going to be reading this to their children to help them understand it. So I draw from a lot of different things, and all of my books, I want to have a message. And so with Isaiah Sunglasses, the message is working with disabilities and not judging people based on their disability. In Molly's Magical Curls, again, you don't hear this story about African American dads. Now, Hair Love came out earlier this year, which was beautiful. So you started to hear more. They took it to the top. And so you're starting to hear more about that part of our culture. So it's just a story that you don't hear. And then you also don't hear about single dads really, really parenting, good African American fathers who parent their children and strive to make their children be who they can be and are really committed to that relationship. So you don't hear enough of those stories. And then again, The Two Flowers is just, the timing is just crazy because I wrote the story for Black History Month, and then we've had all these events this year. So the timing um, was just kind of prime for me to do something like that. And so I hadn't intended to put The Two Flowers into a book, but then somebody suggested I put it into a book, and I did this year. And so that's my second self-published book that was just released in August.
Wow. Linda, it sounds like, what you're doing is just really changing the narrative around all these stereotypes that have existed in our community for generations. And I commend you on that. I want to support you in that endeavor. I think you're doing some great work, and that's what we need to do in the year 2020 and moving forward in this nation, is giving back that power to our community to really change the narrative and show who we really are, and how hardworking our families are, especially our Black men, when it comes to taking care of their kids. I know a bunch of them,
Right.
but we're always seen as
The
deadbeat,
stereotype.
the stereotype. Exactly. So it
Hmm.
sounds like you're doing your part and changing those narratives through your literary devices. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're
And we
welcome.
touched a little bit on challenges and barriers that our community has faced, and that the characters in your books have faced. What challenges and barriers have you endured as a Black woman fighting for a voice in an industry that disproportionately represents Black and brown people? We touched on it a little
Yeah.
bit, but let's go into a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's tough because when you start networking, trying to connect, trying to meet people, trying to get your voice heard, trying to share your work with people, and then sometimes you get negative feedback, and sometimes you get positive feedback. I think the first thing is to remember not to sell yourself short. Just trust and believe in what you're doing and just keep going. I'm a woman of faith, so I believe that something good's going to come from this if I don't give up. If I don't give up, if I don't get angry, if I don't get frustrated, if I don't give up. So, you know, I remember submitting a story one time to a publisher, and this was through word of mouth. I actually know somebody, Curtis DeYoung. He's written several books on reconciliation and racial reconciliation and all kinds of things. And so I was talking with him, and he made a recommendation for me to just share my work with somebody, and I did. And from that, the response was that, well, we don't really do these type of stories. And so, there's a lot of different ways you can take that. And I just took it with a grain, and I said, okay, that's not their type of story. And then maybe I can shift and write that is their type of story, or I can go the other direction. So what I did was I continued to pursue other avenues. There's a few publishers out there that are focused on diverse books alone. But the thing about it is they're so hard to get into. I can't submit anything to them unless I have an agent, things like that. And then finding an agent can be hard because even as an African American woman or a BIPOC woman, how do you find somebody that's a good match? How do you, really get that person that understands your style of writing and stuff like that? So that's another hard search.
And not
That's
just going to take advantage of you, right? That we've seen so
right,
many times.
right. You want to have a good partner in that, in an agent. So finding an agent can be hard. So I've not had an agent. I'm doing everything pretty much on my own. And so, and you don't want to hand out, but sometimes you got to put the pride aside and just say, because I think everybody who's been successful, somebody has extended a hand to them. And so, just working through all those barriers, and it can get frustrating, to do that. But you just keep going.
Yeah, yep, you're absolutely right. Um, did you have many local influences growing up, or even now, to help you through this process? Anyone to lend advice and guidance to you at all? Was it
Oh
just trial
yeah,
and error?
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you mean as an
As,
author or?
as an author. Mhm.
Yeah. So I think Mary with Stripe Publishing, she had a mission and a goal. She has a mission and goal with her authors and has given some good advice. I just participated in a Facebook event earlier this week, Twin Cities Book Salon. Hosted Dara Beavis from Wise Inc. And she was just talking to us authors about, the work, the challenges, and, what you're faced with. And actually, what she probably didn't even know is that she was actually affirming me when she was talking, that everything that I was doing was spot on. That I was doing the right things, that I was staying committed, that I was writing, that I should continue writing and things like that. And she talked a little bit about some of the challenges. You learn as you go. Sometimes you will make mistakes and stuff, but you just keep going and just take that as something you've learned from your mistakes. So she was really helpful. And then I have to say the Facebook groups that I'm in, because they're nothing but authors and illustrators, and there's always dialogue every day. I can open up one of the groups and just listen to the dialogue and see what's happening. And I can ask a question. I can ask any question as an author or even a self-publisher, and I always get a response. So there's some really good space on Facebook to get support from other people who are in the field and have had different experiences in the industry.
I always say that Facebook is, it's the destruction of us, but honestly, Facebook could be used for a lot of good. In your example, it's allowed
Yeah.
you to connect with other people who are in a similar situation as you, or maybe in a position that you want to get to, and you can connect with them. You can learn from them. You guys can learn together as a community. So Facebook is good in that regard, I suppose.
It really has benefited me as an author. And I also want to say the loft is pretty awesome. I participated in a workshop, and they're actually the ones that suggested, made the recommendation to join Facebook groups, get your name out there, get to know other people, hear other people's stories, and things like that. And the loft is actually an excellent place to get support and guidance and help. as an emerging or even a seasoned author. I'm an emerging author. Publisher. I've just been in the field really for the last 3 years. So.
And I'm very familiar with the loft, but for the audience members, can you explain a little bit about what the loft is, where it's located, and what kind of support they have to offer people?
Well, I think everything's pretty virtual now, but like I said, they do offer a lot of workshops and classes in support of the literary field in general. They support you, anything you need to know. And I think really it's in their workshops offerings that they have. And I think that's pretty much it for me. I mean, that's my experience with the loft right now. I'm sure they do a lot more things than that, but it's been the workshops and the classes and then the support, to publishers and authors in the field.
Great. So, what additional advice or guidance can you lend to young, aspiring Black writers and authors? I know you said you've only been publishing for the last 3 years, but you've been writing for a number of years. What advice can you lend our young people who want to go
Right.
into that industry?
Yeah, well, you need to know that you want to do it for sure. You have to commit to it. And if you going to go into the field, just study and learn as much as you can about it because you really want to be the best you can be at it. Take classes on writing, have dialogues with people, talk to other people, including us older folks. We're kind of know some stuff. So, don't leave us out of it. Work hard, learn harder, if you can. And yeah, I think that's what I can offer right now. Don't give up if you really love to do it because there's something there that we probably need to hear.
Work hard, learn harder. I don't think I heard that one before, Linda.
Okay. Well,
With
there
your
you go.
permission, might take that from you. With your permission, of course.
Oh,
I
sure.
like that. Work hard, learn harder. And people say things like that and we label them as cliches, but it's a cliche for a reason, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's what I always say. And I think our young people, they hear, okay, work hard, work hard, work hard, but they don't see the results. So then they stop. And for me, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you have to keep working and praying. I pray to God, and I
Mhm.
definitely give credit to God for all of my accomplishments. So it's a combination of praying, the combination of working hard and being persistent, and then you will eventually see those results. You're not gonna make that $1 million right away, but you'll
Right.
if your goal is money, monetary goals, you'll see 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. You stay persistent, you stay praying, you stay dedicated to what you're doing, and that should just grow. And I think that's could be the same recipe in everything that you do in life. It's just stay
Right.
persistent, stay dedicated.
Yeah, you can't give up. If you talk to an athlete, they would never tell you that they give up, or anything like that. You don't want to give up on your dream, even if you don't see results. And then it could be that one time, you're almost there and then you gave up. But it was that next inch, that you could have taken and it could have made the difference, all the difference in the world. So you want to continue doing it. And as I've said, yes, I've been writing for a long time. And as I said, I'm 65. So I started when I was young. So this is just something that's just starting for me. It's not that everybody's journey is going to be the same as mine, but in between, I had a family, raised a family, and did other things, and learned a lot of other things that helped with my journey here. The other thing I was going to say about Isaiah Sunglasses, when I tried to uh, get it published back in 2000, I realized when it was published in 2017, 2018, that it was 2000, it wasn't ready. It wasn't the
Mhm.
right time, even though I was trying to do it. And then fast forward to 2018, now's the time to do it
Mhm.
because I think back then I would not have gotten the illustrations that I've gotten, when I first published it. And the other thing about Isaiah Sunglasses, I have to republish it now into a new edition because my contract ended with Strive. So at that point, I had to decide, was I going to just let the story go now? And it's like, no, I have to hire a new illustrator, find a new illustrator, and redo the book in a new edition. And that's okay. So things do evolve. But yeah, back in 2000, it wasn't the right time as I look back.
Wow. And I think that just reaffirms to me that timing is everything.
Yeah.
and you're initially were rejected, but again, you stay persistent, you stay dedicated, and 18 years later, that same book that was denied publication is now published.
Right.
And now it is the right time. I think it's an opportune time to be introducing different types of books and narratives that highlight and emphasize racial equity and other types of equity as well in the community, is like disability. So, I mean,
Right.
you really have found your voice within your publications and your books. So, I mean, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, as I said, it kind of evolved into this because I think even as young people, so every time I tell people one of my favorite books to read when I was a kid was To Kill a Mockingbird, and there's been, some controversy around that story and stuff like that. But in the 60s, in the mid 60s, we didn't have a whole lot to read. And so that was just one of the books that I was drawn to. And at that time, I didn't know why I was drawn to it. I just loved the story. I didn't really understand the trial and really what was happening, in the trial part of it as a young kid, but I knew I was drawn to it for some reason. So I think sometimes, we're drawn to things for a reason. And so, as far as helping people understand the importance of diversity and inclusion and systemic injustice and things like that, even as a young kid, I didn't realize that I would grow into really wanting to share more with people about that through stories for children. My daughter and we have a small consulting business where we both do the work. So, like, I am an IDI, an Intercultural Development Inventory qualified administrator. And she actually teaches in equity. She's the director of equity for her work. So, as I got older and starting to do some of the training and stuff around diversity and inclusion, specifically in childcare programs and childcare centers. My daughters were teenagers at the time. And so they used to get really frustrated with me because I pulled them in. I said, you got to help me. I'm putting all this stuff together to take it in to help train people on why it's so important to be diverse and inclusive in your childcare settings. And so they would get frustrated, but they would go with me and they would help me. And so now they're both doing the work, which is amazing. So they didn't realize it at that time that I think I was instilling something in them about the importance around this work that to today, now they are doing the work in their jobs.
Wow. And that as a parent, that is what you're supposed to do, is introduce your children to the things that you're working on and also different possibilities of what they could become. I know my father did it with me. I'm so grateful that I had an active father in my life,
Mm.
a proud Black man who's always been there for his family. And I used to hate it when used to have to go downtown Minneapolis and sell hot dogs with him. And I used to tell him all the time of, why are we selling hot dogs? Why can't we do this? Why can't we open up a restaurant? And he explained to me that if I opened up a restaurant, I have to pay overhead. I have to hire different employees. I have to have this type of insurance and that type of insurance. That way,
Right.
I'm not walking away with anything. If I have a hot dog cart, I can make $1,000 a day at this hot dog cart and not have to pay any overhead on it. Only thing I'm paying
Mm.
for is my inspection fees, and I'm paying for the food cost and any license fees, and that's it. And that's a year thing, so I pay that out all the way. And it just, things started clicking in my head when I got older. It's like, wow,
Right.
that's running a successful business. A successful small business is minimizing your
Right.
expenditures. And now I adopted that into everything I do. I always tell people when we talk about financial literacy, and I'm going to go off on a little tangent,
Oh, you're good.
the most important thing is not how much money you make, it's how much money you save and how less you spend. And that's
Mm.
one of the principles my dad always taught me is, you don't have to make $1 million. Just try not to
Mm.
spend that much once you do get that much money.
Right. Right.
If you have $100,000 and you
Right.
spent 60,000, how much did you make? 40. If you made eighty
Right.
thousand and you spent 30,000, how much did you make? 50. Who made more money? The person who made less in revenue, but spent less. And to me, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
But
So,
this is, we just learn from our parents, and you should listen
oh
to your
yeah.
parents when they're giving you that advice.
Absolutely. You would have a good conversation with my son. My son's a financial advisor in Phoenix, and we have conversations about money all the time. And we have some arguments and we have some good conversations about money. And he's an African American male advisor financial advisor for Merrill Lynch in Phoenix, which is a big to do. He's always so calm about his position and things like that, but he's doing the work and he's educating other people about finances. So, but he actually helped me a lot, and because one of the big barriers as being a self-publishing author is everything's on you. You have to pay for everything. It comes out of your pocket. And he helped me understand that you have to figure out how you're going to finance this stuff, you know? So how are you going to pay for this stuff? My daughter actually helped me too on this. And so you have to think smart about money when you're doing it. You can't use your credit card, you know, to pay for everything. You have to figure out how you're going to fund your passion, if you will. And so I figured it out. And so once I started selling some of the books online, it would automatically, those funds would go back into paying the illustrator for printing and for all of those things. But yeah, finance is a huge part of it. And finances also can be a huge barrier. I did start a Kickstarter campaign, which is, there's 9 days left on it. And so I went that route for the first time, at the advice of another author who did it and was really successful at it. So I said, let me try this to see if this would help fund some of the finances for self-publishing. And so it's still a wait and see and things like that. And it's still a learning process for me right now, but it's something to learn, you know, and finances is part of it. You are a small business and you have to operate as a small business when you are an author or a self-publisher. And that's a huge amount of stress, and it's a huge amount of things to learn and understand.
So with the Kickstarter, first off, how much success have you had so far, and where can people go to make a contribution, and then also where can people go to buy the book?
So for Kickstarter, it is you go to www.kickstarter.com and then you search for the two flowers. And then you'll see my story and stuff on that page, and you become a backer by contributing. So everybody, the minimum is $35, and you get a copy of a signed copy of the book when you contribute via Kickstarter that way. And so, and you have options. You can give more, you can give less if you want, but the minimum to get a copy of the book is $35. And it's a great little place for a lot of authors and, you know, people in the field, you know, the arts field and all kinds of field. I mean, people go on there even to fund their movies, their small, you know, films and stuff that they're doing. So it was an experience. It still is an experience. And I think it's a good experience because it helps you expose who you are as an emerging artist. And so we'll see how that goes. They're all or nothing campaign. So if I don't meet my goal of $3,000, then I get nothing, and nobody's, you know, credit cards are charged or anything like that. So it's an all or nothing sort of crowdfunding platform. But to buy the book, which people can do now, I'm happy to say I ordered my second batch of books of 100, and they can go to www.lncbookworks.com. And the LNC in my small business means leading, nurturing, and cultivating young minds. So it was important to me to have a foundational acronym that really spoke to everything that I'm trying to do.
Wow, that's amazing. I'll make sure to include the link to both the crowdsourcing page and also the link to your business page where people can go and buy the book. I need to get a copy myself just to
Yeah.
support you and also to read. My girlfriend's a kindergarten teacher, and I'm sure she
Yay.
would love to read the book to her children there. So we definitely need to get us a couple copies. So
Yeah, Elijah, if I can say one more thing about that. The book is actually available on Amazon too, which is a whole thing to learn how to upload your book and start to partner with KDP, Kindle Publishing, Direct Publishing. And I have to say that Amazon is really out there for self-publishers. They really, really want to work with self-publishers because they have classes and tutorials and how to do this, how to create your book in ebook format. They are really reaching out to self-publishers to work with them. And it's pretty simple. Well, no, let me not say that. It takes a little bit of work to get your book in the right format to upload in KDP. And the thing about it is they won't take it if it's not in the right format and stuff like that. But because of it being on Amazon, both Miley's Magical Curls and the Two Flowers are on Amazon. But because of it being on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles has picked up on it. And so there's a section in KDP where, as a self-publisher, you can say, do you want your book to go expanded distribution, which means all over the world. But it also means that you can expand it to booksellers and to schools and other institutions that buy books in bulk. So I had clicked that when I put my book on Amazon KDP, and Barnes and Noble somehow noticed it because somebody called me and they said, "Did you know your book is on Barnes and Noble?" And it's like, no, I didn't know that, but they have since picked it up as well.
Wow, that is amazing. So on Barnes and Noble, you all can find both Miley's Magical Curls and then also the Two Flowers.
I think it's just the Two Flowers right
Just the
now.
Two
They
Flowers
didn't,
on Barnes and
just the
Noble.
Two Flowers. Yeah. And I think it's because of its message of, helping children understand social inequality and discrimination. I think that's probably why they picked it up. I haven't seen Miley's Magical Curls on there yet, but I'll have to look.
Okay, well, hopefully Miley's Magical Curls will be on there soon. But for those who are watching this, you can guys can go to Barnes and Noble and you can find the Two Flowers, and also it's on Amazon as
It
well.
is. Yeah.
That is amazing, Linda. Thank you for joining us for today's episode.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right, take care, Linda. Talk to
All
you
right.
soon.